Well, I'm going to ask for at least a second chance if I do bad. Maybe just have lunch with me and we'll see. We'll judge character off of that. But no, I am excited. This has been a big weekend for me. This weekend, Friday night and all day Saturday, I had all of the student ministry mentors, leaders together in this very room. And we just began to plan and train and vision cast for the fall and what that's going to look like for student ministry. But really, we took a good chunk at the beginning and just broke down student ministry to relationships and just boiled it down. And when we look at Jesus' life and how he interacted with people, it was extremely based on just like relationships, right? Jesus actually got in trouble. The religious leaders of the day got frustrated with Jesus because Jesus would spend time and eat with sinners. Like, why does he hang out with these sinners? Jesus didn't just give them something to do and leave, but no, he went to their home, he broke bread, and he ate with them. You know, Zacchaeus was in a tree. Jesus says, hey, come down, I'm coming to your house. I'm going to spend time with you. And so we just boiled down student ministry and said, hey, at the core of everything that we do, there has to be these relationships that are impactful, right? This mentorship relationships. And this series that we're walking through, these collection of talks, that's what we're doing with the teachings of Jesus, but really just the words that Jesus spoke. Like, can we just kind of get rid of some of the clutter and just read the words of Jesus and who Jesus says he is? And so this morning, that's just what I want to challenge you to do. Is not view it as a talk that I'm giving and not view it as something that I've crafted and prayed about, but rather just, hey, these are the words of Jesus. Not thinking, hey, who do we want Jesus to be? Who would it be nice if Jesus was in our life? How do we want Jesus to interact with us? But rather, let's just read the words of Jesus together at face value and say, these are the words that Jesus said. So we're going to be in the book of John at chapter 15. I'm going to read it straight through, and then we're going to kind of come back to different sections this morning and unpack it a little bit. John 15, verse 1, Jesus says this, I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes so that it may be even more fruitful. Remain in me also as I remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up and thrown into the fire to be burned. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourself to be my disciples. So Jesus teaches with a very simple, practical, cultural idea in hand. Right? And earlier in our series, Tim talked about Jesus says, hey, I'm the shepherd. Right? I'm the good shepherd. And to us, we have to use a little bit of imagination because we don't have shepherds in Newnan, right? Like, it's not something that's very common. But to them, it was a very common part of culture. They would have known immediately when Jesus starts talking about a shepherd, what a shepherd does, what it looks like. Imagine, like, for us, it might be a little bit more relevant, like working at McDonald's. You might not have ever worked at McDonald's. I have never worked at McDonald's. But we've been to a fast food restaurant enough, we've been to a McDonald's enough to almost know if you were going to work at McDonald's, this is exactly what it would look like, right? Very practical. You'd have the headset. If it's the drive-thru, there's a button you push, because I've seen them push it, and then they type it into the screen, and somehow it goes to the next screen, and then they look at the screen, and they're like, all right, 6 McNuggets. So they take the McNuggets, put it in the container, and send it off. There's a register, count the money, give it back. When it's time to close, you sweep the McFloors, you lock the McDoors, and you get out of there. You might not have ever worked at McDonald's, but you understand that concept. And Jesus does that here, right? He says a shepherd another time. And here, gardening, farming would have been a big part of their culture. We gardened for fun. There was a little bit more necessity. It was a little bit more part of their life. And so when Jesus begins to talk about a vine and fruit and pruning, it wasn't like this. Again, it's a very simple concept that he uses. He says, hey, there's a vine, and the vine is the source of life, right? The roots go deep into the ground. It sucks up the water, the nutrients. It's actually what gives life and everything to the branches, right? If you take the end of a vine and break it off. The vine itself doesn't die. It continues to grow, but the branches are attached to the vine. Now, the branch, if you break the branch off and throw it on the ground, the branch doesn't continue to live because it gets its life, it gets the nutrients, everything it needs to grow from the vine. But it's on that branch where the fruit grows, right? The fruit doesn't grow directly attached to the vine, it's on the branches. And then there's a gardener that comes through that has planted the branch, that loves the vine, that loves the fruit, and its sole purpose is like, hey, can I produce as much fruit as I can? And it diligently clips away at the big leaves and the rotten part of the branch or bush, whatever it is. And Jesus uses this simple understanding that they would have immediately got to teach. And he says, hey, I am the true vine. I give life. I give meaning. I give purpose. The fruit that you are intended to create should come from me. And you are the branches. Apart from me, you wither and die. But if you stay connected to me, one of the promises that Jesus has is you will bear fruit. And along the way, my Father is the gardener. And he comes and he prunes back the places in your life that would help you grow more fruit, to be more like Jesus, to advance God's kingdom. It's not hard to understand what Jesus is saying. There's not like an encrypted mystical meaning, you know. There's nothing to really uncover other than what Jesus is saying at face value. Now, with students, there's a big part of students' lives is video games. They all play video games, and you might say as adults, you know, we don't play video games. That's hogwash. Because studies show that adults will spend about $50 a month on video games. And if you're like, I don't spend any money on video games, then somebody's spending $100. All right, it's happening. It's out there. Between the phones, you know, like a $1 or like a, you know, Apple game subscription, right? That counts video games. You know, you buy one video game system, you're racking up months of the $50. You know what I mean? And so, I mean, billions of dollars is spent on video games. But let me put it really simple. What Jesus is saying, if it was a video game, it would be a really bad video game, extremely lame. All right, it's like branch the video game. All right, you get it. Right? Branch the video game. You plug it in. The objective, like attached to the vine. Da 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 da. Like you did it. Like no extra level. There's no round 2. Like, you know, attached to the vine. You're a branch. The worst video game would be the one that came after that, which is like branch the video game 2. Remain in the vine. Da, 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 da. Like you did it, you know? Like it's a very simple concept. We are the branches. Jesus says, hey, I'm the vine. You're the branch. Remain in me. It's simple. But the statement about himself, how we relate and depend on him, is so quickly forgotten and rarely lived out. And then we set ourselves differently. We set ourselves up differently in life and wonder why we don't feel fulfilled. Wonder like we feel like we don't have a purpose. Wonder why we feel like there's got to be more to life than this. And it's because the fruit you're producing isn't actually coming from the vine. Jesus clarifies one of the major pitfalls that commonly happens in this situation in verse 1 of our text. John 15:1, Jesus says, I am the true vine. If there's a true vine, that means there has to be false vines. Sometimes our problem isn't that we don't get it. We don't understand, okay, Jesus is the true vine, remain in him, and got it. Sometimes that's not the problem. Sometimes it's just that we've attached ourselves to a bad vine. Which raises the question, and I kind of want to start here this morning, what vine are you attached to? When you think about your life, where do you get your purpose, your hope, and your joy? And whether you're a follower of Jesus or you're new to church and new to Jesus, and for whatever reason you found yourself sitting in a church on a Sunday morning, maybe somebody drugged you here, you saw one of our gatherings online and decided to show up. Whatever it is, you're here to discover, is Jesus who he says he is? And if that's the case, what implications might it have on my life? Jesus says, hey, I'm the true vine. What vine are you attached to? Because sometimes we attach ourselves to find worth and hope and joy and meaning and fruit other than Jesus. Maybe it's your job, right? And the vine that you're holding on to, that you're dead set on this, you put your time, your effort, everything is your work. And when work is going good and the money's coming in, and you feel like you're learning, you're growing, you get your promotion, whatever the case, like you're as a branch that is flourishing with fruit. But when that isn't going according to plan, when the deal falls through, when there's a relationship tension between coworkers that you're supposed to be leading these people, and you feel like, man, I'm not like, whatever it is that you begin to feel as though you're withering more than you should just because job's not going well. Maybe it's not like the job, but it's the money aspect of things. And it's not like the position, but rather just the financial security. And when you have money and vacations are there, like you're fruitful, like life is great. But as soon as hard times come, your value, you feel a little worthless because you're not at a certain economical status. You feel as though there's no purpose or meaning in life. You know, maybe it's not your job. Maybe it's not money, but maybe it's your appearance or the way that you look. And after a little retail therapy, you actually count how many people give you a compliment based on what you're wearing. Your new shoes, your new hairstyle. And if those don't get a certain amount of compliments, you don't feel good enough, you don't feel valued enough, so those go to the back of the closet. You know what I mean? Nobody noticed me or how many likes on social media. Are people actually engaging? All those things. And when people are like noticing how you look and the things you've changed, like you feel great. But as soon as there's something negative said or they don't notice, your value, your worth begins to diminish. What vine are you attached to? As a student pastor, let me break this off a little easier. Some of you are a little bit too attached to your kids when it comes to where you find purpose. Like you live too vicariously through your kids, right? And don't hear me wrong. Like it's good to be like excited when your children do something, when they accomplish something, and all of those things. But do you want them to accomplish it for them, or would it be nice for them to accomplish it because you want them to accomplish it for you? And when their life is going good and they've done what you want them to do, you feel great. And if they go a different direction or accomplish something else, you feel like you haven't done your job as a parent, as a person, and your worth, and you begin to feel withered. Now, this one's a little close to home for me. I got on that slippery slope of living through my children. I have two little girls, Lila and Rosie, and they played softball for the first time this year. And I was pumped. I played baseball growing up, and so, here I am, like we're back in the game, And so, again, they played softball. Let me phrase that. They played 6U softball, right? 6 years old was the oldest you could be, all right? Very first year, they couldn't catch, they couldn't hit. They go through practice, and it's the practice before the first game. And so the coach comes to me, and she's like, hey, I've tried to put a mock fields positions together where everybody's going to play. Which one of your girls do you think would play better between first base and shortstop, because I'm going to split them up between there. So we had a little conversation. I get in the van. I shut the door. Boom. Turn to my wife. Babe, we made the infield. She's like, what? I was like, yeah, we made the infield. She's like, there's no we. They. I was like, yeah, but, I helped. How did they learn, I was a part of it, I did more than just sit at the metal bleachers the county provides. I'm in this thing, But I was quickly reminded that I was not on the infield, I was just on the bleachers. And then I did it again. There's out of the 4 teams, they pick a couple girls for an all-star team at the end of the year. And so Lila and Rosie got picked to be that. Boom, babe, we made the all-star team. And she's like, Adam, we did not make anything. I was like, I know, but I didn't make it growing up. I was never good enough. I never got picked. But our girls is the first year. We did it. Can you believe it? It's great. And then I find myself on that slope of living through my children. Again, there's nothing wrong with wanting the best and your kids to be great. That's good. But do you put too much worth and too much value that it defines who you are, not who they are? I tend to cling on to the money one a little bit too. I haven't worked out since college, but there is a specific muscle I work out all the time, and I call it the hustle muscle. And if you have the hustle muscle, then you know what I'm talking about, because we look at everybody else that doesn't have it, and we're like, yeah, you ain't got that hustle muscle, baby. I'm the type of person, you give me a penny, I'm going to trade it up to a jet plane. Like, I can do it. If you just got to, wheel and deal, and I love to just buy and sell. It's just in my blood. I can't help it. I'll buy and sell, and I get excited to make a little money. But sometimes, I'll get caught up in the money aspect. How much I'm making? Did it actually work out? And I begin to cling to that and feeling like, hey, man, am I good enough? Did I work enough for this? And I put value on myself, and so much so that who I am kind of becomes to be identified by those things. Jesus says, I am the true vine. I determine your worth. I give purpose. I give life. The fruit on your branches were intended to come from me. If you're new to church and new to Jesus, this is a giant thing to wrestle with, because it completely rearranges your thought process and value in life. I mean, to go from something being the source and your driving goal in life to, hey, I'm now going to detach from that and hold on to Jesus. If Jesus is the creator in the universe and he knows me best, he has fruit, he has a plan, and I'm not getting rid of all these things, but I'm attaching to Jesus, and no matter what's happening over here, if my job's going bad, if money's going bad, if things with my kids aren't going how I planned and I intended, like, I'm still going to work and be diligent in that. But at the end of the day, Jesus defines my purpose, my meaning, and Jesus gives me life, and I'm going to stay sustained through that. That is radically different from a life from somebody who doesn't follow Jesus. And that's a big thing to wrestle with. But if Jesus is who he says he is, Jesus says, I am the true vine. So let's say that you're there, right? And maybe you're a follower of Jesus and you're like, yeah, I'm with it. Like, I'm attached. Like, I can see the whole picture, and this is who I am. Let's imagine that we're all like, hey, I'm attached to Jesus. I'm a part of that. Jesus is the true vine. Jesus then begins to talk about remaining in him and the fruit that he promises if we genuinely remain in him. Verse 4, Jesus says, remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. I'm going to say it one more time. No branch. You and I, we can't bear fruit by ourselves and must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I'm the vine, you are the branches. Remain in me, and you will. Not you might. Like, good luck with it. No, Jesus says, remain in me. It promises you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you could do nothing. This is to my Father's glory that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples. I'm the true vine, and if you remain in me, you will bear fruit. I give fruit. Here's the problem with that. Is we find ourselves to be fruit critics. We love to compare fruit, right? When Jesus fulfills this promise of giving fruit, of producing fruit, starting something new, a change of life, a change of mindset, growing the kingdom through you jumping into something that Jesus has in store, when these things start to happen in our lives because we've attached to the vine, Jesus begins to fulfill his promise, and as we attach to Jesus, we begin to look at all the other vines and say, they got red and green apples, and I only got green apples. Well, look at all the fruit. I just got little bitty sprouts of fruit on my branch. Here's the thing, is we're just branches. We're just supposed to be a branch, the branch video game. And then we begin to look around and compare. And when we compare, we get insecure. And then when we get insecure about who we are, let me phrase that. When we get insecure about who Jesus says that we are, we create all kinds of internal emotions that are just negative. And we're never intended to compare. We're just supposed to be a branch. Let's say Jesus starts to grow a little patience in your life. And all the parents said, amen. Let's say, you're attaching to Jesus and you're like, hey, I need to be a little bit more patient with my kids, I need to be patient at work, all these different things. But you feel it, it's starting to grow. You're excited about just Jesus challenging you to be different, to be more like him. You're not there yet, but it's starting to grow. And then in that, you see other parents, how they act, how they interact, and you say, I bet you they never yell at their kids. They probably never get on to their kids the way that I do. Man, if I don't got real patience. And then we begin to lie to ourselves. Jesus clearly loves them more. Look at all the fruit on their branch. And instead of allowing Jesus to give fruit, we just start to compare ourselves. Maybe you feel like inside, like, hey, I'm in a season of life. I see the value in starting to serve and help grow God's kingdom through service. Put others before myself, sacrifice some time, whatever that is. And let's say it's Foundation Kids upstairs, right? And you're like, hey, I'm good with kids. I can jump into this. Children need people to come alongside them as they grow in their faith. And it's from God. God begins to grow this fruit in us, put this passion inside of you. I'm attaching to the branch. And you get up there and you look around and you say, I don't know as much as everybody else. You begin to let the lies in your head say, I shouldn't be up here. Man, the other kids like the other adult. I'm not as funny. I don't know what to say. I've stumbled through the small group questions. God doesn't need me. Look at the fruit on their branch. Maybe you step into being a little bit more intentional and just talking with Jesus and praying. And you're like, hey, I know I'm not going to read the whole Bible in one sitting, but I'm just going to at least get into it. I want to look more like Jesus. So I got to talk to Jesus. I can't have a relationship with the vine unless I'm talking. So you start this journey of a prayer life and just starting something. And then immediately, once you're into this, 2 days, 3 days in, you're like, other people probably pray twice as long as I do. I don't even know what to say while I'm praying. Does Jesus even hear my prayers? And you begin to second guess and doubt and compare yourself to other fruit around you, and Jesus says, I give fruit. I struggle with this one too. But if I'm honest, most of my struggle with this one comes from just like as a passion God has given me for the church to bring others closer to him, and that fruit that God allows me to be a part of here at Foundation. Like, I am 100% confident in the mission and the placement that God has put us as a church. We're on mission to create a You Belong Here movement where people are a destination and Jesus is in the lead. If you put a pin at the courthouse and do a 5-mile radius, there's just under 60,000 people. And studies show that way too many of them don't know Jesus. And so for whatever reason, God has allowed me to be a part of this church that gave us this building right here on the square, and we're plugged into Noonan High School. We're plugged into Ruth Hill. We have mentoring happening. There's just so many outreach events. There's so many people that don't know Jesus that are starting to connect to Jesus through what God is doing here at Foundation, and I see the fruit. I'm a part of it. I'm excited, and then I'll go home on a Sunday morning as I'm driving. I'll scroll through Facebook, and I see another church's Facebook feed and their video, and I'll say, man, they had more people than us this Sunday. Man, our outreach event maybe theirs had more people that didn't know Jesus than ours did. And I'm almost blinded, and I miss the fruit that Jesus is giving us. As a branch, we just hold on. And Jesus gives fruit, and we get distracted, and we start to look around. And it's just like our job isn't to compare and be fruit critics. James Cook was a British explorer, and he understood that we as humans have a tendency to want what other people have, to compare to other people. Now, he was an explorer while scurvy was a big thing. And if you don't know what that is, like scurvy is like a pirate. There was a vitamin C deficiency when they were sailing, and so people would get really sick. But he noticed that on German ships, scurvy was disappearing, and they would serve this thing called sauerkraut daily. And on their ships, it wasn't there. Now, he didn't know everything that was happening, but he was putting pieces together. And so he's like, hey, let's serve like sauerkraut to try to combat scurvy on our ships. Here's the problem. it's sauerkraut. You know what I mean? Like, I like a little bit of sauerkraut on a bratwurst, but honestly, it's not because I like the sauerkraut. It's just because I really like the bratwurst and people do it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't like, I would never just get a fork and eat some sauerkraut, right? And so it wasn't happening. But then he came up with an idea. What he did was he only gave sauerkraut to his officers after dinner. It was presented as a delicacy. So naturally, the crew began to look and watch that every single day the officers got something that they didn't have. It's like, hey, I want some of that. So then there was a system where they could earn it and work for it, and before you knew it, the entire ship was eating sauerkraut. Now, for them, wanting what others had turned out to be a good thing. But for us, it only hinders us from actually producing the fruit that Jesus intends for us, that Jesus created for us and is giving us. Remain in me as I remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in me, and you will bear much fruit. If Jesus gives you apples that are red and somebody else green apples, who cares? Just be a branch. It goes against everything biblical to say, hey, I'm going to trust and be dependent as a branch is dependent on the vine. I'm going to be dependent on Jesus and then second guess what he's doing. And then second guess what the vine has in store. It goes against what Jesus is saying. It goes against what the Bible has in store for us. You can't earn anything from Jesus. You can't work hard enough. Your job is to be a branch. I love what Tim said when he was talking about God as the good shepherd and sheep, that we just need to go back to sheep school and just learn how to be a sheep. You know, a sheep and a shepherd, a sheep is solely dependent on the shepherd. Like, I'm just going to follow him around, like, bye, like, give me some food. Like, okay, bye, like, defend my enemies. You know, like, well, going to the stable. Okay, like, a sheep's not making any decisions. You know, it's like, bye, this is our relationship with God that Jesus is laying out. Like, hey, I'm the vine, you're a branch. All right, you don't got anything to do. But if you're detached from me, it's going to wither, you're going to die. So just hold on. Got it. We just need to go back to branch school. Even easier. Last part. It says this. I'm the true vine. My Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. The pruning part is really hard to teach. I wrestled with it. As I was preparing this sermon, I would work on the top part and get to this part and just wrestle. How do I present this? How do I balance this Jesus who I know loves the world, came and died on the cross, but also present that judgment is coming and he will return and hell is real? What do you do with that? I mean, if you're new to church and new to Jesus, the last thing I want to do is just like, you know, you're going to go to hell, you know, like, but also I don't want to like exclude the fact that Jesus talks about it and just say like, hey, Jesus loves you, don't worry about it. So I sat and I wrestled, like, how do I communicate this? And I felt this huge burden of trying to explain it in a way that would convince you to love Jesus. Like, because that's my heart. Like, I want you to come to know Jesus attached to the vine. And so I desire it, and I want it so bad. It's like, hey, how can I do it? And part of my study, what I did this for the sermon, is I went and read the book of John. But instead of reading everything, I just read the words of Jesus. Right? Who does Jesus say it is? What does Jesus say? And so just the red letters. And if you're like, hey, I've never read the Bible cover to cover, I don't read it much, start with the words of Jesus. It's great. If there's a place to start there. Even if you're like, I can't read a whole gospel, just read the words that Jesus said. There's a couple times you might need a little context because he'll say something you're like, that doesn't make any sense. Well, you don't know who he's talking to or whatever the case, but just keep reading, right? Just what can we learn about Jesus as we read his words? And as I did that, I found a couple things. I found that Jesus was pretty direct, right? He was pretty to the point. There's not a lot of fluff in his words. People ask him a question, he answered it. When he's teaching, he teaches and would say, hey, this is what I mean by that. And so what I've decided to do is I just want to read what Jesus says. Not what I'm saying, but rather what Jesus says about this. I'm the vine, you're the branches if you don't produce fruit. This is what he says in John 3:3. He's talking to a guy, and it says, unless you are born again, you cannot see the kingdom of God. John 3:16, this isn't Jesus talking, but it's a really popular verse that we read a lot. For God so loved the world, he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. Yes. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save it through him. Yes. We got to keep reading. Whoever believes in him is not condemned. Yes, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already, because they have not believed in the name of God's one and only Son. Jesus says in John 12:46, I have come into the world as a light, so that no one who believes should stay in darkness. But there is a judgment for the one who rejects me and does not accept my words. These very words I have spoken will condemn them at the last day. There's a balance of the love of God and the truth that one day Jesus is coming back and will be judged on one single credential. Are you attached to the vine? Is there a genuine attachment where there's fruit being produced? And this is the really scary part as a followers of Jesus. Right? If you come to church, if church is part of your life, Jesus speaks directly to that. And honestly, it's so humbling and sobering to read it. In Matthew 7:22, Jesus say, many of you on that day will say, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name? Did we not drive out demons in your name and perform miracles? Jesus, wait, I read the Bible. I read it. I served at Bridging the Gap on Saturdays. Jesus, we went to church. We even went during the summer. And even on that Sunday where the student pastor was preaching, we knew Clint wasn't going to be there, and we still went. God, I went to church. I was there. Then I will tell you plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. Fake vines. And this is a balance that Jesus didn't shy away from, but he was direct. The difference between a branch that stays on the vine and a branch in the fire is fruit. And the only way to have fruit is to be connected and dependent on Jesus. Not to be around Jesus, not to wear a cross necklace, not to study who Jesus is, not to go to church, not to be better than your neighbor, not to post a Bible verse on social media. You don't get fruit from serving on a team, not from memorizing the Bible. A branch, you and me, the only way that we really get fruit is having a dependent relationship. As a branch is dependent on the vine, we attach ourselves to Jesus. Jesus promises fruit. And unless we bear fruit, it's like a branch withering on the ground. And Jesus says, I never knew you. Don't convince yourself about false vines or spend your time comparing your vine to other vines. But just be a branch. Because a life disconnected to Jesus ends the exact same way a branch disconnected from the vine. Dead. But Jesus says, my Father is the gardener. Not my Father is the angry neighbor that jumps the fence with a chainsaw and destroys the garden. No, my Father loves the plants. Nobody loves the plants more than the gardener. And the gardener comes, and as soon, the moment fruit begins to be produced, he says, hey, how can I help this fruit grow? He doesn't say, oh, this branch doesn't have as much fruit as that branch. Let's get it out of here. No, the moment there's a sprout, the moment there's a spark, he's like, yes, how can we help this grow? Let me trim back this big leaf. Let me get this out of here so that way it can get some more sun. The parts of the bottom that maybe touch the ground and could wither, let's get that out because he's there for the fruit. He's helping the branch. He's growing it. No one loves the plant more than the gardener. No one loves you more than Jesus. No one sees the potential in you more than Jesus. You're not too young. You're not too old. You've not messed up enough. You don't need to know anymore. You don't need to come to church. You simply need to believe that Jesus is who he says he is and do as Jesus says. And Jesus says, I am the vine. Remain in me as I remain in you. This is to my Father's glory that you bear fruit. It amazes me to think it's to my Father's glory. To glorify God. The praises in the heavens, God feels glorified, we can add some value to God by simply remaining in Jesus. We don't work for it. You can't be good enough. But what glorifies the creator of the universe is the fruit we get from remaining in the vine. It's simple, but profound. And Jesus says, that's who I am. This is who you are. Would you remain in me?